One of the reasons your photos aren't the way you imagine sits in plain sight, and it's easy to see. And no, it's not your lens cap. In this video, we're going to discuss what that largest reason is and how you can take hundreds of better photos by understanding this one simple concept. So first of all, we have to understand that most photographers face the same problems at some point in their career. Either their photos are too blurry, they're underexposed, they're overexposed, lack of contrast, too much saturation, they're in focus at the wrong point, or they have too much noise. So if you can resolve this one issue, you're well beyond your path to becoming the world's best photographer. So as soon as you start learning about photography, I guarantee you, you're going to hear this one thing.
Use a low ISO 100 to 200.
Keep that ISO low. This gets grilled into your head that you must keep your ISO low. It can't go above 400, it can't go above 640. The noise is too much. And once you start to learn this, it's really hard to unlearn it. So I was having this conversation the other day with a wedding photographer of mine, and we were both having the same conversation, like, why do we keep our ISO so low when we know it's better to have a high ISO with noise than a blurry image? Anyway, long story short, we both agreed that a low ISO can sometimes cause more problems than solve problems. Now, it is really hard to break this trend because everywhere you look, everyone's doing the same thing and everyone's saying the same thing. So ISO doesn't physically impact how light reaches your sensor of your camera. It's not physical like your shutter speed or your aperture. ISO is like a volume knob on your stereo. The more you turn it, the louder it gets, or the more you turn it, the brighter the image gets. The more you turn it down, the darker your image gets, or the softer the volume of your stereo. So what's actually making the photo brighter? Well, what's happening is you're turning that knob and your sensor is becoming more sensitive to light or more dull to light. Now, you're probably asking the same question that everyone else does. Every time I raise the noise, I just get noise and it ruins my image completely. Before I explain this more, just let me show you something. Here's the same image shot at different ISOs. The image with the higher ISO has been exposed properly, while the other is underexposed with the low ISO. Now, when we expose the underexposed one correctly, you'll see that it actually has more noise than the image taken at the high ISO. So the next question you get is, well, what causes noise then if it's not ISO? It's actually a lack of light on your image, not ISO. Noise is used to capture details in darker areas of your image. Now, with all this information, how can you implement it in your photography? Now, shooting at the lowest possible ISO is going to guarantee that I have no unnecessary noise, and that's really what I'm aiming for. I put my ISO at 100, and it's the last thing I change in order to capture my composition. If I've adjusted my aperture and shutter speed to their ideal position, I'll then change the ISO if I need to. This will help keep the image less noisy and really sharp. The statement I get is I can't put my ISO above 640 or 400 because then it just creates too much noise and makes my image unusable. This is simply not true. Most mirrorless cameras these days are able to have their ISO lifted well beyond 12,000 and still be very much usable. In fact, I've taken images of the northern lights with my ISO well beyond 12,000 and they've still turned out to be really great images. Now, if you're shooting indoors or you're shooting handheld, you're just going to have to lift that ISO because of the lack of light. Otherwise, you're really going to risk having blurry images. Now, if you're shooting in the middle of the day and you're outside, then you can easily put that ISO at 100 to properly expose your image. But if you have limited light, please don't be afraid to bump up that ISO. It's better to have noise than blurry images. Now, I do want to give you some tips to get the best quality out of your high ISO images. Firstly, try not to crop in on your images. If you do this, it will really make the noise noticeable and look unprofessional. Get compositions that look good in camera to help avoid cropping in post. Secondly, use noise removal software in post-processing. A lot of people nowadays use a program called TOPAZ or TOPAZ, which is meant to be really good to help preserve details in the subject, but get rid of the noise in the background, which is ideally what you want to do. For me personally, I just use Lightroom. I found that the new noise AI that's out is really good. It'll get rid of the noise, create a new composition, and you can edit that separate photo with the noise reduction applied to it. So what you're really looking for in any noise reduction software is to get rid of the noise in the background, but keep your images sharp. Generally, this means that your subject might have a bit more noise, but you can't see it over the whole of the image. The best way to deal with noise is to have an ISO invariant camera. So an ISO invariant camera means that if you underexpose your image, it'll have the same amount of noise than if you properly exposed your image. So your underexposed image, you drag up the exposure in post-processing, it'll have the same amount of noise than the properly exposed image. These cameras are really good if you're shooting in dark situations, such as the northern lights, astrophotography, nighttime street photography, whatever it may be, these cameras are really good. So to name a few of these cameras, we have the Canon R5, R6, R3 1D, the Sony Alpha 7, Mark II model and newer, the Nikon Z6, Z7. So what I'll do is I'll put a link to a complete list of ISO invariant cameras in the description below so you can check it out at home. So if you thought this video was good, smash that like button. That'll help YouTube promote it with even more photographers. I hope you can use the advice given in this video to take better photos. Till next time, happy shooting, guys.